Severe and Benning in the Morning on 1620 The Zone, 1620thezone.com, and the 1620 The Zone app. Here are Michael Severe and Damon Benning.
This is the Severe and Benning in the Morning Top 25 College Football Countdown.
Got him! Touchdown! Pay dirt!
Wow! It's a look at one team from the top 25.
Pull the trigger. Sends airmail deep down the middle of the field.
Oh. The Severe and Benning in the Morning Top 25 College Football Countdown on 1620 The Zone.
Hartman back to throw. Badgers send forward pass. Intercepted. Colin Wilder at the 40. Loose to the 50. All alone 40. 35-30. 25-20. Angles left to the 10. He has to beat the quarterback. And the quarterback pulls him down. Hartman inside the 5 and down to the 3-yard line. Colin Wilder comes up with Wisconsin's 4th interception of the game.
Welcome back. Severe and Benning in the Morning, hour number 2 on a Monday. We continue our top 25 countdown. We're at number 21, the Wisconsin Badgers. And, of course, Ben Wargo covers Wisconsin football, basketball, and recruiting for more than 17 years now at the Badger Nation. How weird will it feel, Ben, without having Barry Alvarez as part of the program for the first time in decades?
Well, I mean, it's going to be different, certainly. But he's still going to be around. That's for certain. It's hard to take Wisconsin out of Barry Alvarez's bloodstream, especially since his grandson Jake is going to be a senior this year, playing tight end for Wisconsin. So he'll still be around. I think it'll be a seamless transition, though. That's kind of the news of the offseason is who's going to replace Barry Alvarez, and I don't think they could have found a better replacement for him than Chris McIntosh, who played under Alvarez on a couple Rose Bowl teams 2 decades ago, who has worked under Alvarez here for the last several years, the last couple as his deputy AD. And Barry's kind of groomed him as his replacement. He's kind of gave him some bigger projects, bigger things to handle. He handled a lot of the university's COVID response over the last year. So McIntosh is going to fit right in. I don't think you're going to see a drastic change in leadership. I think that those two have walked in lockstep for a long period of time, and I think it's going to make the athletic department kind of just business as normal. Not a lot of people looking over their shoulders or anything, but still it'll be different without Barry calling the shots, certainly. And you look at the tenure he's had with the success, not just as a football coach, but as an AD with all the different programs, having won multiple championships, both at a conference and a national level. It's been a really good run for the Godfather up here.
Ben, who's the real Graham Mertz?
We would like for him to please step up, right?
Yeah, please step up.
Yeah, I mean, we saw him in the opener against Illinois, and he was fantastic. 5 touchdowns, no picks, only 1 incompletion, and he thought, whoa, this kid is something special. It's kind of who we expected him to be eventually. Maybe not right out of the gates. Someone who was the MVP of the U.S. Army All-American Bowl, and he comes in, red shirts, has a year to develop, and then he was expected to be the backup last year until Jack Cohn goes down with a foot injury, and suddenly he's kind of thrust during fall camp into the starting lineup. And so he plays this exceptional game against a bad Illinois team, and then bam, he gets COVID. And he's down for 2 weeks. Wisconsin has to cancel 2 games, as we all remember, against Nebraska and Purdue. They come back against Michigan. Mertz plays without much practice time, and he plays okay. They beat a bad Michigan team, and they're sitting. I think they're top 10. I can't remember. But then he faces some good defenses, and Northwestern, Indiana, and Iowa really scrambled him up a little bit. They made him. They switched formations. Mertz was forcing passes. And he didn't play well. Threw a ton of picks, and he looked like a true freshman. Comes back against Minnesota, plays okay. Wisconsin wins. In the bowl game, he plays better in the bowl game. So, I mean, at least he ended the year on a high note. You would hope that we see more of the Mertz against Illinois and less of the Mertz against Northwestern this year, right? I mean, he's had a full year now as a starter. He knows what it takes to be a starting quarterback. And more importantly, he's had a full offseason to develop. Wisconsin missed a lot of time last year, as did a lot of programs, in developing those young connections. And with a young starting quarterback, you needed to have that rhythm with your receivers and your running backs, and that is developed during the off seasons, during spring camp. It's developed during summer workouts. And Wisconsin didn't have that last year, and I think you saw that once some injuries popped up, that there just was a big disconnect between quarterback and running backs and wide receivers. And I think now that they've had a full off season, that shouldn't be an excuse anymore. And I think Mertz is coming into this year very confident in his ability as a quarterback and, more importantly, as a leader. So that's probably a big question for this team is what steps will Graham Mertz take, and can Graham Mertz be that quarterback we saw against Illinois every week of the regular season?
Ben Wargo joining us, talking Wisconsin football, number 21 in our top 25 countdown at the Badger Nation. So the run game, which we just expect to just be good every year, 3.9 yards a carry. How much was that just not having the running backs in place? Did the offensive line not play as well? What was the problem with the run game?
Well, certainly when you lose a talent like Jonathan Taylor, you're going to take a step back. And Wisconsin had some options at tailback. Just no one really quite panned out the way they wanted it to. You had a walk-on in Garrett Groshek, who's kind of be maybe your number two guy. You had a backup in Nakia Watson, who Wisconsin was very high on, but it just did not work out. He has since transferred. They really like the true freshman in Jalen Berger, who actually led the team in rushing. I think he finished with 301 yards, and he just played in 4 games. He missed a couple due to COVID. But the weird thing, guys, is that Wisconsin only had one 100-yard running back the whole season. That was against Minnesota. That's unusual for a Wisconsin program. And if Mertz is probably the biggest question. Running backs might be on that same line, like 1A and 1B. This was a group that really needed the spring. Guys like Jalen Berger and backups Isaac Garendo and Julius Davis, who has only 1 carry in his 2+ seasons at Wisconsin. They needed work with a new running back coach this year in Gary Brown, and all those guys were injured for the most part. I mean, there were times in camp where Wisconsin's having to convert fullbacks to that spot and having to get really creative. I mean, they ended camp with no healthy tailbacks. And so that's lost time for that group that they can't get back. So this fall is going to be incredibly important for them to try to develop some depth and some confidence, so much so they brought in former Clemson running back Ches Malushi, who's going to compete for playing time. And, Ches doesn't have a lot of experience at Clemson, but he has more than the rest of the group combined. So that's going to be a huge chunk of time here for this unit to try to get some semblance of consistency, because without a good running game, that puts more pressure on a young quarterback in Mertz and this wide receiving core. And Wisconsin, they're just not talented enough, in my opinion, to be a one-dimensional offense. They need that power running game to keep defenses honest. That really is when they've had their best teams, when that running game has established the pace on the ground.
I will say, listen, I think talent, it's kind of strange when you talk Wisconsin, because I think it's developing outside the numbers. You've recruited well. Then I look at defensively, you've always been good, but you got a lot of playmakers, man. Coach Leonard's transition the last 3 years has, I won't say seamless, especially dealing with some injuries, but man, it's death taxes in Wisconsin being good defensively. This year should be no different.
Yeah, they returned almost everyone from their back 8. And that's critical. All the linebackers that could have gone pro decided to come back for another year, especially Jack Sanborn, who's probably the leader of that group at inside linebacker. Leo Chanel, too, started for the first time last year, had a really, really good season. Both outside linebackers are back. Everyone's pretty much back in their secondary. They lose a free safety in Eric Burrell, but they had 2 kind of strong safeties in Scott Nelson and Colin Wilder. You just play the clip at the start of Wilder interception in the bowl game. It's a very strong back 8. I mean, I would say it might be one of the stronger back ends in the country. The question for them is defensive line. They lost both their starting defensive ends, and there's no real upstart, young, talented guy that you can automatically slot in and say that's going to be the guy that's going to replace Garrett Rand and Isaiah Loudermilk. The good news is that Leonard did a lot of just 2-down linemen last year, and so he can rely on the talent and experience on the back end until that young group kind of shows itself and kind of gets established. They also have a really good nose tackle in Keanu Benton, a junior. Then Bryson Williams from Omaha has played injured last year, and he has said in the spring that he's in the best shape of his life. And so there's a chance that they can maybe make him kind of that swing defensive line where he can play some zero technique, or even kind of make him a defensive end, or kind of a hybrid of the two. just to get some options because he's their most experienced guy on that group. So it's going to be interesting what that front end of the defense will do, but the back end of the defense is going to be exceptionally good this year, and they have some cocky, swagger-filled quarterbacks that think that they could have a really breakout year. Both those guys, Faion Hicks and Caesar Williams, they both said that they're coming back this year because they feel that this Wisconsin team could really be something special. Ben
Wargo joining us, covering Wisconsin football, basketball, and recruiting the Badger Nation. You can find him on Twitter, number 21 out of top 25 teams here on our countdown. You mentioned Chez Malusi and Jalen Berger. Has the combination of cheeseburger been brought up or Chesburger been brought up?
Ooh, that's good.
Is that good?
I hope you don't have that copyright. Steal that from you.
I just thought it looked pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm sure once Wisconsin fans can see this tandem, I think it's going to be a tandem.
Okay.
I don't think either one of these guys is going to be good enough to be the number one back, especially because of the lack of experience. And I think Gary Brown, who has been coaching a long time, is going to try to rotate some of these guys in. But to be fair to Gary, he doesn't know what he has yet. I mean, there's so limited film on Berger, and Malusi is coming in and kind of first time with this type of offense here at Wisconsin. So this camp will be big for that group to get some confidence, to kind of develop a rhythm. That's what those 15 practices are kind of for in the spring, to kind of lay the foundation of your team and start building from there, and not to have Berger for most of the spring or Ches wasn't here yet, or even any of the backups too, just really kind of hamstrung this team a little bit. And so that's why I think this summer was big for them. I believe all those running backs were healthy throughout the summer, so that's important. And now to get the coaches on the field with them, maybe this team can start to kind of piece things together, because right out of the gate, their schedule's pretty strong.
Oh, yeah.
You open against Penn State, then you have Eastern Michigan, then I think you have a bye, then you have Notre Dame in Chicago, and then Army in back-to-back weeks. And those are two very different preps against two very talented football teams. And then you go right into the meat of your Big Ten conference play. So they're not tiptoeing into the season by any means.
Ben, most people want or 1A, Wisconsin and Iowa. It seems like both teams, you mentioned both, Iowa extremely talented on the back end as well. Quarterback is the key. For Wisconsin to do Wisconsin things, what's the biggest variable that has to become a constant?
I think Mertz has to play consistent, and Mertz has to he doesn't need to be a Russell Wilson type player. He needs to be more of a Jack Cohn or a Scott Tolzien. And what those two did really well, and why those two quarterbacks in recent years led Wisconsin to Rose Bowl appearances and Big Ten championship games, was they were smart with the football. And they took their chances, but they were calculated chances. They didn't turn the ball over. Mertz against Northwestern, when he got down, he tried to make plays that weren't there, and it dug Wisconsin into deeper holes. Mertz just needs to be a consistent, smart quarterback. And I think if he can do that, this team can go far. I think defensively they're going to be very strong. Special teams is going to kind of be iffy a little bit. So you need your offense to be productive and to be consistent and to be smart, and not to put your defense in bad spots and not just rely on them the whole time. So I think if Mertz can play at a consistent level and to limit the miscues, this team should be able to compete and win the Big Ten West, and then we'll see what happens if they get to the Big Ten championship game.
Ben, we always kind of try to go through the toughest 3-game stretch for a team. In your opinion, which 3-game stretch will more define this team? Is it Notre Dame, you mentioned in Chicago, Michigan, Illinois, or Northwestern, Nebraska at Minnesota?
That's a good question. I haven't studied the schedule that intense other than the first month. I think probably the second one you mentioned. That Iowa game. Anytime you play Iowa, that typically in the last couple of years, that's been kind of determines where you're going to finish in the West. And just because Wisconsin and Iowa are so similar, I think Minnesota is just one of those teams where you can't quite put your finger on how good they are. Some years you think they're going to be, outstanding, and they're going to really kind of take that next step, and then they kind of take that big step backwards. And other years, you're not expecting much, and then they surprise you. We certainly have seen that. Wisconsin has kind of dominated that series until, Minnesota just finally ended that long, decade-long losing streak to Wisconsin a couple of years ago. So, I think that stretch will be interesting, that Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota stretch. But personally, I think it's just the first month because this team, 4-3 last year, disappointing offensively. Didn't get much rhythm going. Hardly scored points against Northwestern, Indiana, and Iowa. You want to see them come out and kind of establish a tone early. And I think how they play against Penn State, Eastern, Notre Dame, and Army, I think that 4-game stretch, I think, for them will be critical in terms of trying to reestablish this Wisconsin brand, this Wisconsin culture, and to kind of make themselves known that the West Division is their division and someone's got to come take it from them.
Ben, we appreciate it. Have a great week, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben.
Right, yeah, going over that. So which one do you think?
I kind of like
Notre Dame, Michigan, Illinois, or Northwestern, Nebraska at Minnesota?
Northwestern, Nebraska at Minnesota.
Yeah.
I actually think that may leave the yard.
Another one? I went off the wall.
Goodness
so it was 6-5. Is that 6-6 now?
Yeah, they're playing softball.
Yeah. And that park, from what they said, is the ball's supposed to fly in there, too. Even the ladies playing softball, which is in the same building, they said the ball's been flying.
Hey, so I actually think Minnesota's going to be okay. I won't say pretty good.
Not just because of all the production back, right? Because a lot of that production was bad.
Yeah,
last year.
But you
I
know
always
what?
wonder about that.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to really cap last season.
It is
right.
difficult.
So I think experience will matter. I think the fact that they seem to buy into whatever it is that he's saying. We'll see what happens with Morgan. I like Ottman Bell. I like Ibrahim. I think that 3-game stretch is going to be tough. Northwestern is the team you think may come back to the pack. If he has another good year, replacing what he's had.
This is supposed to be their down year,
especially defensively.
Yeah.
Man, Northwestern isn't going anywhere for a long time.
Based off of their history.
If it's not this year.
You mentioned Wisconsin's defense. So
they're going to be amazing.
In the last 8 seasons, from last year all the way going back to 2014, they have been outside the top 20 only twice. 2018 and 2014. 2 times in that they were in the top 5, another time in the top 10. So 3 top 10s in that group. But the crazy thing last year, this rush game, 2 years ago, 5.4 yards a carry. Is that good? I mean, you played on a team that had pretty good. In about 44 carries a game. Yeah. Last year, in about 42 carries a game, 3.9. It's unheard of for Wisconsin's run game. Yeah. Unheard of. It just doesn't happen.
It's got to come back.
They've only got 2 games where they're playing a team coming off a bye. The Army game, which is always strange to play, but it gives them, I'm sure they'll be fine. And then the Iowa game, which is maybe the biggest game of their year. Iowa's coming off a bye.
I like both their back 8s, Iowa and Wisconsin. They're going to be pretty talented.
Yeah. It really is a 1-2 thing. But as I said last week, that plus 1,100 on Nebraska winning the West, I mean, throw a few bucks.
Yeah, I heard that.
You never know. Look.
What'd you say? You said just saying.
Our friend went to Vegas.
Yeah.
And he made a little bet.
Did the darn thing. Hang on.
He made a little bet.
Okay.
The over 6.
Okay.
So, you got to do what you got to do. I completely believe it. The
over 6 is all right.
It's hard. I mean, they put it at 125 to discourage you in a way, but it seems too easy.
Yeah, right.
Seems too easy, man. It's too easy.
Can they start 3-1?
Oh, they better. They better. I'm going to that Illinois game to be there in person because I believe that can be, should be, might be a program-defining game.
See, why are you guys so? You sound like Coach Frost.
Could be.
Coach Frost, not so much, but some of the players.
I thought Coach Frost did in a couple of different interviews did kind of say it's
he
huge.
said it could. Well, so yes and no. See, I almost was going to say that, but I think what he meant was that game is that game could could get them the win that they need. Beneath
their wings. Yeah, yep. He said the one thing we haven't had is momentum.
So, but the players, and you know what's funny? And I was pissed I wasn't in last week because this was driving me crazy. What have I talked about all offseason with you about the emotional psyche? Uh-huh. Is this finally the year where one game doesn't define the season or beat them twice? Like we've been talking about this.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know.
Like, I think it's good sometimes, Damon, to beat target a game like that. Some teams are good. Some teams have done that really
depends.
Well. This helps Wisconsin, for example, to play Penn State open in the season.
You have to be emotionally. It can. It doesn't always have to be a negative.
Yeah.
But I was a little surprised. They must like their team.
Program defining. Under Scott Frost, of course, because the program's been
they
defined.
must like their team because you don't really say that unless you do.
Yeah.
They must like their team.
Hell, they kind of liked their team last year, right?
Yeah.
And it got off to a start that they weren't, it's a tough start, having to play Ohio State first. And, yes, they were fired up and they played well in the first quarter. But, where from there it's downhill in a lot of ways for a lot of people. The Omaha World Hero Camp Countdown is into the top 10. We'll give you an update on where that is right now. We mentioned the NBA free agency getting started. So many point guards are part of that. We'll do that. And then come a little bit later, another top 25 team, Miami. A team different in a lot of ways from what Wisconsin is doing, but a team expected to be about the same in terms of wins and losses.
Yeah, but funny, too, because you just talked to Wisconsin and Mertz. De'Aaron King has the same card deal.
Yes.
Card.
Yeah.
Isn't
Right.
that weird?
Yep. Well, I like
King and Mertz.
the De'Aaron King deal he has with dude from what's his name from Central Florida, Mackenzie Milton.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. The whole Florida State Miami kind of connection there. It's not normal. We'll do all that when we come back here on Severe and Benny in the morning.